Did any of you do anything in the last few days or weeks or months or year that brought you joy?
I have these conversations, which I would put on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed a number of things. I haven't really thought about it as finding joy, but I guess that's what it is. Every joy doesn't have to mean you're jumping up and down and, making noises.
You mean high ecstatic joy?
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't come very often.
My favorite everyday joy experience is to get into the ocean, but I only do that in the summer.
Ocean is good.
Well, yes, I mean, there are all kinds of moments of joy. I've talked about driving before, but moments of great joy, reading poetry, having conversations with people.
Yeah.
It's all real joy. It's all that part of the self communicating with the self, I suppose.
Yeah. And even looking around on the internet, I experience joy when I find something important that I was looking for, or discover something new that throws light on something. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking, ooh, that feels good, but it does.
The ocean sounds like a good answer too.
It is. At least it's an immersive experience.
Well, that's a pun, but I was just thinking that usually when you see something beautiful, you want to get into it, but you can't. With the ocean, you actually can immerse yourself in it quite literally. Maybe that's why I like it so much.
Yeah, and some of the canyon landscapes in Utah that have given me great joy, part of that is that you're in the same space with them, and they kind of define the space or the quality of the space. So it is a kind of immersion, even though initially it's just your eyes.
My kids who go to this college out in Wyoming go kayaking through those canyons with the rivers that run between them, and I just think that's got to be the peak of immersing yourself in a landscape.
Yeah, I can see that.
Mountaineering, going through large snowdrifts while it's snowing and feeling like you are encompassed within this fluffy white stuff coming down from the sky and laying there. It feels a bit like one is getting close to nirvana.
Yeah, and with a snowfall, there's this silence that descends on the landscape. It's very special.
Children will lie down in the snow and go into a completely timeless state. And I remember doing it myself as a child, and I've seen my own children do it, muffled in the snow with the snow around your ears. And you can call them and they won't even hear you. They're in some kind of ecstatic state. We're getting a big snowstorm tonight or tomorrow morning, so I'll have to see if it still works. If I don't come back, send out the Huskies.
How big a storm is it?
Well, 6 to 8 inches, pretty big for the deep south here in Rhode Island.
Well, that's right. I remember seeing warnings about winter storm reaching the Northeast. So you'll probably see some snow.
I have been cutting glass to make stained glass. And this is new to me, but I've had this thing for geometry my whole life and also light coming through glass. So this is a skill that I'm learning, and I've been poring over Islamic tiling designs for just that perfect shot of pure geometry.
Yeah, exactly. That's some place you can really appreciate geometry.
And it's such amazing geometry, really. I still want to do a talk on that one.
Yeah, and that tenfold symmetry is so important.
But not all joy is good. There are some types of joy we could do without, like the joy running the post office.
True. The joy, the Postmaster General. There is no joy in the joy.
Yeah, but also aside from nature, sometimes small things bring me joy. So, Sheikh al-Bashir, one of those pens you gave me never quite worked. It was a bit scratchy. So I got this book from the library on nib smithing, and I got some silicone grease and micro mesh and, basically tuned it. And now it's amazing. It's like I'm driving up a mountain road and I hit a sheet of black ice and I drive over the mountain. That's how smooth it is. It's like I feel like the pen's gonna fly off the edge of the paper.
Wow. Which pen did this, the Waterman?
No, actually, that one was already pretty good. It was that old British pen.
Oh, I remember that one. Interesting. I just inked up my fountain pen today for a note. Just a note that I thought needed a fountain pen. But here it is. Here's my fountain pen.
What type is that?
It's a Mont Blanc 221.
One of the fancy ones.
Well, it doesn't seem so fancy, but
One of the fancy names.
one of the fancy names.
Yes, exactly.
But it's been reliable, and I've signed a lot of the important documents in my life with this pen.
That's good because, a lot of the fancier and more expensive pens actually look nice and have serious reliability issues. So I'm glad it's been working for you. So, what was a moment where a friend helped you through a difficult time, and how would you use that experience to help another through a similar time in their life?
What an excellent question.
Huh.
That's going to take a little thought for me.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that tries to pretend he doesn't need help. And I don't know if I've ever really leaned on anybody for support. It's not that nobody's been helpful, but it just doesn't stand out.
Well, there have been a number of times in my life where I've actually leaned on you, C.D. Talha.
Well, you're here. Welcome to it.
That's, in some cases, been decisive.
Well, it's hard for me to imagine I've never done that with you. I'm just not remembering. You were certainly a good, reliable person to take LSD with.
Yes, that's right.
And you want to be with somebody you can trust then.
You do indeed. Yes, and you were a lot of help to me in those cases.
Well, good. I'm sure my experience would have been diminished or worse if you hadn't been there.
Well, that's nice of you to say. No, I can think about my one bad trip, as it were.
Or your difficult recovery.
And you were just consistently calm and pretty much insistent that, oh, come on, it's a chemical, it gets metabolized. Give it a chance.
Yeah, it may be slow, but it's gonna go away. Yeah, do you remember? It seems to me that there was a woman sitting at the table when we were talking about that. Was there? Do you remember?
Yes, that's right. I don't know that I can be any more specific.
Yeah, well, I don't either. I'd have to sort of find it on my life's timeline. But I guess it would have to have been either Chris or Susan.
You remember the role she played in the incident?
No, I don't. But she was a positive presence. I don't remember if she had anything in particular to do. But I think in a situation like that, having another person who's calm is a good idea.
Yes. No, I remember that incident in returning to the school and the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Being very concerned that somebody was going to look at me and say, "You're not making any sense." And then we sat down at this table with, yes, that one woman and several other people, and a conversation started. And then I realized I was in command of the conversation. And that's when it got better.
Yeah, it got better when it got better.
Yes, yes. And I might add, that was the last place I would have wanted to be.
Well, it's not ideal.
But there was just something about the dynamic, or my being new, or an outsider, or something. Anyway, suddenly I realized I was in control of the conversation.
I didn't remember that many people being present.
Well, maybe we're thinking of different moments.
I don't think so.
Well, I remember this one fairly clearly.
Yeah, I don't remember it as clearly, but I clearly remember it.
Right. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for the ones you've given me that I don't remember.
Okay, friends, hit up a Adria.
I don't have that many people in my life, but I know that there have been a few times that things have been tough and I've called on you.
Oh.
But in terms of how I could use that to help another, I don't know. Just, I'm not really in a position to help others so much, but I tried to be kind.
The parts of my life that stand out in that regard are times when I felt excluded or on the outside or alone, and people have taken me into their group. That's the kindness that really stands out to me. And so how you could use that experience to help other people is to be on the lookout for people on the fringes who are excluded or not involved or something, and take them under your wing. And the awkward introverts of the world really appreciate the extroverts who notice them and do that, take them in and make them part of their circle.
Well, yeah, there's the thing about it's a gift to somebody to let them know that you see them. And especially if you're trying to relate with the best part of that person. And they can perk up from that. And it doesn't really take a special routine or technique or anything. Yeah, I think so many of those occasions are where we just feel that we need to be with someone or belong to something or be taken seriously. So always take people seriously. They like it.
Except for yourself.
That's right.
And then watch out for that. I'm often reminded of, I think it's a maxim from Al-Ghazali, about how he who makes light of himself is liberated from himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
Yes, it's true. Over time, I have learned a whole lot more. I've learned a lot better how to laugh at myself. And sometimes that's the automatic reaction instead of the old negative one. Because usually when you take an event, for instance, personally or let it be too serious, it's because you're taking yourself to be more important.
Yes.
It's not the thing itself. Anywhere else to go with this one? Or shall
Yeah.
we go on?
Are we getting at your sense of this, Zeta Vidria?
Yeah, it's good. You know, since I asked this question and since I also was, thankful to you so much for different things, for let's say like sending me those pens or all the help you've given me in my life. A few months ago, I saw this pen made in Turkey that I wanted to get you, and it was basically Islamic geometrical patterns, and it had La ilaha illallah on it. I thought, oh, with Islamic geometry and everything, you'd like that. And then I noticed how many zeros were after the thing, and I'm like, oh, that's about 3 too many zeros. But it's nice that people are making such things.
Yes.
I mean, in a world where, most of the stuff is made in some factory in China or whatnot, I mean, it just makes me happy to know that there are still individual craftspeople making nice things, because there's so much joy in doing that. I mean, not even to make money, but just for oneself. I think one of the things that makes me happy is just making something. When I know someone that can benefit from, let's say, a wooden cup or a wooden spoon or a badly knitted pair of socks, then it gives me joy to give that to that person. Like, for instance, here in Seattle, there are an awful lot of homeless people that look very cold. So over the last few months, I've been knitting like winter hats and just giving them randomly.
Yeah.
As an act of kindness.
Sure.
You say they look cold?
Yeah. I mean, some of them just don't seem to have proper clothes on at all. Whether that's by choice or lack of infrastructure here or what. I believe everyone needs kindness.
Yes.
And, there's this thing in this country where people tend to say, well, someone's in a certain situation because they must be a drug addict. Well, not everybody that's in a certain situation is. And even if someone is a drug addict, well, a lot of people ended up, abusing alcohol or many other things without intending to become an addict.
Sure.
People that are in that situation do need our compassion.
Yeah. I definitely feel for those people, not feel against them.
Yeah.
And I've seen people go through Alcoholics Anonymous, and what a wonderful thing it can do. So these people, whether they know it or not, are right on the edge of discovering a spiritual path, probably as close as the next 12-step meeting. And those 12-step meetings, they provide, I would say, a bigger dose of genuine spirituality than most other things people could do, including most churches, including going to most churches.
And for some people, that's actually much healthier than traditional spirituality.
Yeah.
I knew someone who was an alcoholic and tried to fix it through religion. And all that he would do is transfer his addiction from the alcohol to prayer and do it obsessively for a few weeks until he'd burn out and then go back to the drink. And it was only through Alcoholics Anonymous that he actually got better, not through Islam.
Right. It addresses that situation very well.
And besides, refrigerators in the Fritz, you don't call an air conditioner repair person. And I just think a lot of the priests and imams are woefully underqualified to deal with some things.
Oh yeah, there aren't that many people that know how to deal with that. I mean, that's a case where maybe you can be supportive, but the person really needs spiritual therapy, and you may not be the one to provide it.
Yes, they may need therapy.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about AA and other 12-step things is they insist that the higher power that you're supposed to rely on can be, it's whatever you think, whatever you can feel, whatever you can acknowledge. You don't have to call it God or anything. And I've watched people go through 12 steps for a while, and they're happy to have a non-divine higher power, but most of them eventually get comfortable calling it God.
Do you remember exactly what Houston Smith's relationship was with AA?
No, but he knew one of the founders, right?
He knew somebody named W or whatever.
Oh, Bill W.
That was it, Bill W.
Yeah, Friends of Bill, yes.
Because he thought a lot of that organization.
Yes, well, Bill W. was really played a very special role in that, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but they worked together to try to figure out, what needed to be transformed in order to get free from that demon. A lot of it was trial and error, and then retrospective on what they'd been through, and who knows what else they might have been exposed to that, might have led them a little bit this way or that. But it's truly an amazing story. I mean, just from these two guys comes this thing that has helped so many people.
Well, they obviously found a real way,
Yes, exactly. And of course, if you read the Alcoholics' big book, I think most of it is written by them. And it's written in a nice way. It says, we found that we needed to do this, or we found that when we did this, this was our result. I mean, it's personal and impersonal at the same time. It's a wonderful grace.
I've heard that several times.
Yeah, there's some very, very spiritual 12-steppers. They may not know that much about religion, but they have the right relationship with their higher power in themselves.
Well, while we're off on something just a little different, question I came across pondering today, and I know we've discussed it before, but I just sort of like to have some more thoughts about it. And the question is about tradition and traditionalism, because in many ways, the further away you get from the formal tradition, the weaker the soup gets.
Yeah.
But if you keep everything, it's going to be undigestible and of no use, because it was directed to a different people in a different world.
Well, yeah. Also, the danger comes in as soon as you add ism to the word.
Yes, of course. Okay.
Absolutely. You can have a tradition and live according to a tradition, but you can't make it, you can't make tradition a doctrine.
Well, I feel like I know some people who've tried.
Oh, yeah, it's been tried. I mean, tradition should be something that you can sort of sit down and take a rest in it. A nice, reassuring, supportive place, unless you demand too much from it. Too much from it that should be personalized for you.
Okay.
Heidegger says, I know that according to our human experience and history, everything essential and great has arisen solely out of the fact that humans had a home and were rooted in a tradition. I don't think there's anything to disagree with there, but it's important to know that traditions are organic. Put down the roots and eventually the shoots will come up. The important thing is a tradition doesn't have to be a tradition necessarily exactly from the past. 2,000 years ago, these wonderful things that I like to talk about, or we like to talk about, had their own tradition. It's organic. The problem is when we cut ourselves off completely, and that's what we've done in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Well, oh yes, but there are two sides of that coin. People have forgotten and have cut themselves off, and shame on them. But the formal traditions have not kept pace with the world in which they need to be relatable, and shame on them.
Yeah.
And other than blaming both sides, how does one sort this out?
You mean, how does a person get the benefits of tradition when it may be a little bit stale?
Yes, and I guess I'm really not talking about seekers, because they'll find whatever they need. But generally, those who want to live a quality of life consistent with the truth and the harmony of the universe.
I think it can only be done through art and literature and poetry.
There's always nature.
Yes, nature is there. Nature is it. But it's becoming harder and harder. Just as it's harder for people to find a living tradition, it's harder for some people to see the beauty of nature because nature has been so ravished by us. And I think, you're asking this question. I think there's no simple answer, but it can't be black or white. I think Lawrence said it best when he said, the soul must take the hint from the relics our scientists have so marvelously gathered out of the forgotten past, and from the hint develop a new living utterance. The spark is from dead wisdom. The fire is life.
Great.
Nicely said.
The thing about it not being necessarily a path, I think, takes me back to that feeling I tried to express and probably didn't very well about something you can, sort of lean back into and feel warm and comfortable. If a tradition isn't nurturing your spiritual life, whether you know it or not, I mean, sometimes we benefit from things without realizing it, but it just shouldn't be a source of trouble. It should be a friendly place.
Well, I really like Greg and Francis's answer to the question, which is practice the traditions, but do these things too, But that's a seeker's answer. That's not for all the people.
Yeah, it's like, do it, but pay attention.
Yes, pay attention. Be present.
Yes, be there when you do it, and perhaps discover that it is done to you.
Yes.
Okay. What do you believe is your spiritual vocation?
I'd like to speak to this one. This is something I think about all the time. So I think the spiritual vocation of every human person, the great project of life, is to break down the barrier between the subject and the object. And I'm not just talking about between God and creation, although of course that's the ultimate subject and object, but between two people. And Kierkegaard said the trick of life is to treat everybody else as if they're a subject and treat yourself as if you're an object, which is wonderful because we do just the opposite. And I think a lot also about masculine and feminine, not just men and women, but the masculine. I think masculine and feminine are best thought of in terms of vocation. To be masculine spiritually means to have a vocation to do things masculinely and sometimes femininely too, but maybe primarily to be an example. So I have this idea that I'm bringing these two things together. For women, the way women, or maybe I should say the feminine way to break down the subject-object barrier is to make the other a self. And the masculine way is to make the self an other. So that's why women personalize the other, take what is other or the object and bring it into the realm of the personal subjectivity. And of course, women's bodies are made like that. Taking in the other into your body, if it sounds sexual, it's because it is. It's completely sexual, and also at mothers. And for men, the opposite, to make the self an other in the sense of objectifying the self. So traditionally, we don't see this so much because of technology anymore, but traditionally it's the masculine vocation to put yourself in danger in order to protect the vulnerable. That's an example of making what is a subject an object. And it's just a matter of direction because the point is the same, it's to break down the barrier between the subject and the object. So to sum up, what is a spiritual vocation as a woman or as a person who has a feminine vocation? I would say my spiritual vocation is to break down the subject-object barrier by selfing the other.
Yeah, it's a point of departure, and you're right that ultimately the result's the same.
It's a matter of direction, spiritual direction.
Yeah, it's a useful distinction.
And of course, an interplay between immanence and transcendence too, which in the end, the distinction collapses. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Well, that's interesting and a lot to think about, Abby. Why don't you turn that into an essay?
Yeah, I've been trying to write about it for years, but my ideas keep shifting.
Well, I know somebody who can help you because she really lives to help people write. Oh, wait a minute, that's you.
Yeah, it's like the shoemaker's children go unshod.
Spiritual vocations, anyone?
I don't. I have, over the years, as a seeker, looked for a spiritual vocation, and I suppose that truly my vocation for most of that time was seeking, because it was never really, for most of that time, about finding so much as it was always something bigger, always something more, always something higher.
That word wayfarer, I like that. It captures what you're saying, that the vocation is in the seeking.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm a seeker too, but I get a lot of meaning in communicating things. And when it works, it's a real high.
Yeah.
And spiritually productive as joy.
Yeah.
Fulfilling kind of joy.
That's sort of part of blurring the distinction between subject and object, because when you have a communicative relationship,
Exactly. Yes. You share an experience with somebody, not two separate experiences, but one shared experience.
Is that co in communication?
Could be.
I used to love teaching English to small groups. Just for that reason, there's no greater high than seeing their eyes light up when they get a poem. Nothing beats that.
I know that feeling. I really enjoyed giving that last mudhakara, come to think of it. Are we moving on? Have you answered this question, Zeta Badria?
No, I think my spiritual vocation is discovering falsehood and getting up on a soapbox and letting everyone know that I've discovered that falsehood and that they're all living behind the veil of Maya, and painfully ripping that veil asunder.
Or maybe gently, if possible. But I can relate to that too. I find that to discover a contradiction and to situate it correctly are both very satisfying. Sort of solve the contradiction without denying it.
I know a couple of hermits, which is a vocation I'll never understand.
I
Because
can understand that one, I think.
Glad to hear you say that.
Glad to hear who say what.
Glad to hear Abby say it's a vocation she'll never understand.
I think we're put in this world to get to God through other people, but apparently with some people it's direct. I just can't imagine it myself.
Well, I can't imagine it, as a complete solitary, but I can imagine spending most of your time that way and seeking in that way or praying in that way. But I think you're going to have to bump into other people to, round out your experience of life. And also, if you've gotten anything from your hermit way of life, you have something to share. That means somebody else. I mean, there are a lot of people that lived lives as a hermit for a certain number of years, and then some of them became bishops.
I definitely understand the vocation of the hermit. If we lived in a different time and place, I could definitely see myself living alone in a cave. And if anyone ever found me, I'd take my long hermit stick and beat them over the head with it.
That's not a hermit, that's a cyclops.
I mean, I do have to say, the last time I met a person named Odysseus, I did think he looked rather tasty.
That was the Greeks' knock on anyone who didn't have civilization and culture and society. The Cyclops is the anti-Greek who lives alone in a cave and has no table manners, picking up sheep and eating them whole. It was the antithesis of Greek civilization. No laws.
Yeah, the symbolism of one eye is intriguing because, we have in the scriptures that if thine eye becomes single, or at least something about the eye becoming single, as a good thing. And in some traditions, a third eye is a good thing. But I think that, maybe the third eye is what unifies the first two eyes.
So one eye or three eyes, just not two.
Well, yeah. I mean, two is fine, really. As long as your sense of reality is something other than just two.
Just one thing about the ancient Greek civilization. It did have, there's the example of Diogenes the Cynic, who lived in a wine vat and defecated in the streets to make a philosophical point. So it wasn't all high culture.
Oh, no.
So what is high culture?
When you smoke some marijuana and then go to see the opera.
I think that's a lovely answer.
What is life, and what do you consider to be living? Are rocks alive?
I don't know how a rock would be alive, but one way would certainly be that it's a component of the greater living being,
Good phrase.
It can't not participate in life, whether it knows it or not.
What stands out about a rock to me is that it doesn't have organic unity. It's not clear where its boundaries are. If you break it in half now, you have two rocks.
Yeah.
But when I think of a living thing like an organism, all of its parts are related because they have the same end. They all work together for the good of the one being, and that gives the being unity that a rock doesn't have. But that makes me think about machines, and machines have a lot of organic unity, but it's kind of an artificial organic unity imposed from the outside. So that's interesting. I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, I think of anything that's man-made, so to speak, as being an externalization of intelligence or consciousness or whatever.
Right. The intelligence is imposed as order on the parts of the machine,
Right.
whereas with an organism, it comes from the nature of the being, from the inside.
Yeah, that's right. The organization is imposed in the one case and it's inherent in the other.
But I don't know if organic unity is a good definition of life.
Not
Maybe.
necessarily.
I am remembering my time with the Indians, and they saw the rocks as alive and that the rocks had stories to tell. And they were quite disappointed in the modern stories the rocks told.
What do you mean modern stories?
Well, the stories they told of late weren't that good or weren't that enlightening.
Oh, so it's the stories they heard from the rocks recently.
Yes, that's right. The stories
Yeah.
the rocks would tell, because they were in some sense alive, like everything that exists is in some sense alive. And in that sense, yes, rocks are alive.
Right. Well, and even a highway bridge can be alive in Bali. I mean, you wouldn't erect a shrine to something dead.
Tell me more of the story.
Well, I just remember that here and there in Bali, there are these little shrines and, you know, some kind of vegetable offering on them often. And they can be on anything.
Yes, and they were everywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't remember one honoring a bridge.
Well, I don't know where I came up with that, but I think somebody told me that I might have seen it because I did drive around Bali a bit.
Well, certainly if you're driving around Bali and you're driving around a bridge, you wouldn't want to leave the gods out.
Right. Yeah, you should recognize them because they're going to keep you from falling into the river.
There was a wonderful moment in Bali, and maybe you were there, because I was with several people and we stopped at this mountainside coffee shop and sat down at a picnic table at the edge looking over this beautiful valley. And we grabbed the menus and ordered a coffee sampler and some other coffees. And the woman who was waiting on us brought the coffees and then sat with us and produced a jar of fresh tobacco from which she hand rolled cigarettes for us.
I sort of remember that.
Yes, and then when we all had one and were enjoying our coffee, and she left, and it was only after she left we realized that she had brought an offering for the gods and left it on the edge of the table. Because why would you want to exclude the gods?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know how that works, but it's nice.
Yes, and it's everywhere in Bali, the seamlessness between the spiritual life and everyday life.
Yeah.
One of the wonderful things about Bali.
Yeah, it's a surprising primordial kind of holdover.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's a little more like indigenous peoples for whom everything is alive. Anyway.
Yes, so that's all I wanted to add.
So everything's alive.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that I think are relevant to this. One is something that Lawrence wrote when he was discussing the religion of the Native Americans. He said, in the oldest religion, everything was alive. Not supernaturally, but naturally alive. There were only deeper and deeper streams of light, vibrations of life more and more vast. So rocks were alive, but a mountain had a deeper, vaster life than a rock. And it was much harder for a man to bring his spirit or his energy into contact with the life of a mountain, and so draw strength from the mountain, as from a great standing well of life, than it was to come into contact with the rock. And he had to put forth a greater religious effort. For the whole life effort of man was to get his life into direct contact with the elemental life of the cosmos, mountain life, cloud life, thunder life, air life, earth life, sun life, to come into immediate felt contact and so derive energy, power, and a dark sort of joy. There's effort into sheer, naked contact without an intermediary or mediator is the real meaning of religion. And at the sacred races, the runners hurled themselves in a terrible cumulative effort through the air to come at last into naked contact with the very life of the air, which is the life of the clouds and so of the rain. It was a vast and pure religion, without idols or images, even mental ones. It is the oldest religion, a cosmic religion, the same for all peoples, not broken up into specific gods or saviors or systems. It is the religion which precedes the God concept and is therefore greater and deeper than any God religion. And then later he writes, to the ancient consciousness, matter, materia, or substantial things are God. A great rock is God. A pool of water is God. And why not? The longer we live, the more we return to the oldest of all visions. A great rock is God. I can touch it. It is undeniable. It is God. Then those things that move are doubly God. That is, we are doubly aware of their Godhead. That which is and that which moves, twice godly. Everything is a thing, and everything acts and has effect. The universe is a great complex activities of things in existing and moving and having effect. And all of this is God.
Yeah, that's good. It's sort of like a recognition of mutual dependence, that everything is part of the whole, or anything is. And so, yeah, whatever it is, it's essential in the present moment.
And ultimately, if you really believe in the wahdatul wujud, you can come into contact with God through a rock. It doesn't have to be through prayer or a person or even an animal. Sometimes some of the simplest things are those things that awaken us. I know R.S. Thomas said he only had one religious experience in his life, like a true mystical experience, and it was a tree that caused it. He was looking at the tree and suddenly his third eye was opened. So I think the important thing is to pay attention, because you never know if the next rock you see will bring you to God.
Right.
Yeah, pay attention. You know, it comes back around for me to, you don't experience anything but God. Why don't you know it? You know, why are we unaware that that's what's happening?
Any more thoughts on that one?
Yeah, are we done with this box of rocks?
Have we gotten out of all of these rocks that we might? Any more stones to throw, anyone?
Well, you know, we could start to talk about mineral, because if you break a rock in two, you may have two rocks, but you still have one mineral.
Oh, yes.
But I don't know if that's that helpful to this situation. Minerals are a whole world. You know, I love running across the name of some mineral and looking it up and really just appreciating its structure, whether it's its crystalline form or whether it's the geometry of the internal lattice, crystal lattice or whatever. Some of these things are, you know, compounds that have a whole lot of different atoms in them, combined in ways that I would not have expected. But they all have an intelligible geometry, and I like that.
Intelligible geometry.
Yeah, I mean, that's why people like minerals, I think, is both the form and the substance. We start with the mineral, then we impose form on it and make jewelry. So I'm done with minerals.
Okay, I'm done with minerals.